Matt and Greg used to interview movie stars, but now they're doing a podcast.
And we're back, folks, for our second... No.
We're not back. We're starting.
Hello, folks. This is episode 2. That music was brought to you by the lovely band Venice.
Lovely band. Absolutely.
Amazing band. And what is our show, Matt Levitz, the creator of this program? We are.
Well, Greg Srzavosty, let me tell you. We didn't introduce ourselves, did we? Hi, I'm Matt.
Hi, I'm Greg Srzavosty.
Okay, then.
Some people also call me Matt Levitz.
They don't mean it as a compliment.
We're going to talk about what the show is first for listeners who haven't heard our MIB inaugural episode.
Yeah, today we're going to be doing True Romance, and this is actually part 1 of 2 because we got so many interviews for this one that we had to break the show in half. We didn't want it to be 4 hours long, so we're going to do 2 2-hour shows. And for part 1, we're going to listen to, having talked to earlier,
very good,
Patricia Arquette, Dennis Hopper, Bronson Pinchot, and Tony Scott. So this junket took place August 15th, 1993.
Okay. Where were you when at August 15th, 1993?
I was sitting in this room doing these interviews.
Oh, okay. I wanted to go personal thing. I wanted to see personally. I was just out of college, a couple months out of college. I was really shy. I still am shy, Matt. That's why at this junket, this is a spoiler alert. You're not going to hear much of me. You're going to hear some of Matt Levitz asking some questions. A little bit, but I was very silent.
Yeah, I had been doing junkets for about a year at this point. I started in 1992. My very first junket was Chaplin with Robert Downey Jr.
Oh, very cool. Mine was John Cougar I think it was John Mellencamp, Falling from Grace in 1991.
I remember that movie.
Yes, that was my first junket.
Well, I didn't see it, but I remember that movie existed.
Yes, very good.
So, yeah, I mean, there were junkets where we were really, really active and asking most of the questions. And then there were other junkets where we just kind of sat back and didn't feel like doing the fight. Because oftentimes it was a fight.
Just getting your question in a radio roundtable because everyone knew the beats and the rhythms. Like once a talent would answer his or her question, someone would immediately jump in right now. That's how quick it was. It was Quicksilver responses.
And sometimes 2 or 3 people would, and they would shout each other down.
Oh, those were horrible. Those were often and horrible.
Yeah. No, it happened to me a lot, and it was frustrating when I was trying to ask a follow-up question and I got shouted down by someone who was changing the subject because then you're not going to get back to it. You know, you're not going to say, okay, do you remember 5 minutes ago when you were talking about this? You know, like once the subject is gone, it's gone.
Right. Just it's hard to go back to it. Matt, you really wanted to bring to attention an aspect of the press junket scene about once this material was recorded, where did it go? How did people use this stuff?
Yeah. Every episode, we want to kind of start off taking about 5 minutes and sort of giving you kind of an insight into the junket world before we get into listening to the interviews and stuff. And this is our topic for today, the different ways that the junket interviews would be used.
Can I start off first since I'm very selfish?
Yeah.
I'm very selfish.
No, I'm not arguing.
Sorry. I would take the interview. Thank you for that. Not arguing. I would take the raw tape. I'd send it to the engineer. I'd write a daily prep service, and I'd have the engineer. We'd actually pick out around 20 sound bites from just movies I or my partner at the time. I had different partners would do from the press.
We don't need to talk about that.
So okay,
keep it about the work world.
The work, yeah, no partner stuff. So every day I'd do a prep service for Westwood One. We'd send out just a feed of 20 sound bites, and I'd do my radio prep service. So it was a daily thing. So it's essentially my show is bite driven. So I take the stuff, get the bites. But other people use it for different purposes, man.
Well, yeah, what we did was kind of similar. I wrote countdown shows.
Oh, cool.
For music shows. So like, you know, the top 20 of the week, whatever was on the charts. So we did a lot of one-on-one interviews with bands and artists. So that was the bulk of our shows. You know, Mariah Carey said that writing this song was really hard, and then you cut to the soundbite, and she would say, "Oh, it was so hard writing this song." So that was mostly what we were doing, and then at the end, we would do 4 movie bites that were just bonuses that were just attached to the show, and they would go out to hundreds of stations all over the country, and the radio DJs could use this stuff if they wanted to. And just put it into their shows however they saw fit. So that's how we used these bites.
Did you cut up the sound yourself, or did you have someone else?
No. We sent it over to Westwood One.
Oh.
And it had heads and tails. And we sent a script saying you're going to start on this word and end on this word.
Okay.
So it was directions to the engineers. so we didn't have to work too hard.
Oh, but picking the actual movie sound bites, they would.
Yeah, we would have these interviews, 20 to 30 minutes long, and I would listen to the interviews, or I would remember because I had been there,
Right.
as part of the interviewing team. So I already knew what was there and what was good, and I would just fast forward over to it. And the bites had to be between 20 and 30 seconds long.
Right.
So, if something that they said was a really long story and you couldn't cut it up, without losing important parts of the story, then you couldn't use it.
Yeah.
So you had to find something that just fit into that sweet spot of 20 to 30 seconds.
It's the first thing I learned in radio. Just keep the story and the bite short and sweet. Nothing over 30 seconds.
Yeah.
We were the very, very legitimate way of actually using it. We actually used it for radio.
Yeah.
To cut up the sound.
Yeah, I do know. I mean, a couple of things off the top of my head. I remember one guy worked for Rick Dees, and he had his top 20 show for radio hits, but he would take these junket bites and pretend that they were calling him on the phone. So he would EQ them so that it sounded like they were on the phone, and he would take a couple of bites, and hopefully, when they came into the room, they would say hello, and when they were leaving the room, they would say goodbye. So he would take those, and he would turn it into a one-on-one phone conversation.
Oh, wow.
Completely fabricated.
Okay.
It was not a phone conversation. It was from these junkets. But that was a valid way to use them. I know somebody else who would write newspaper articles out of these junkets, and she transcribed the whole thing, and she would tell some stories. It would be... I picked him up at his hotel, and we went driving, and we ran a couple of errands. And first we went and we bought some flowers, and
wow.
and then we would go to a restaurant, and she would describe this whole thing, and it was completely made up. The interviews came from the junket roundtables,
Right.
and there were 10 people asking questions, and she would just write this story as if she was sitting at a restaurant with him, and she would describe what he was eating, and, he would laugh at this story and then turn and ask the waiter something, and it was all just made up.
Wow. I've never heard of this one.
Yeah, but again, it's valid. As long as all of the quotes that you put into the person's mouth were things that they actually said, then you haven't really violated anything.
Yeah. Other than that, it's a print story, not a radio story.
Yeah, but that would happen. I mean... Before we started the show, we were talking about this. You mentioned Joey Berlin's book, Toxic Fame.
Right.
He took junket interviews, and he took all these bites that were on the same subject and turned them into a book.
Yeah, about the toxicity. Did I say that correctly? Of fame.
Yes. And everyone who was there sitting at the table with the tape recorder running owns their own tapes. And you could use them for whatever you wanted. You could sell them overseas. Whatever you could do to make money from these tapes, people did.
Yeah.
And so, anyone who sat at those tables could be doing a podcast using these same tapes right now if they had thought of it. And they still can.
And folks, you still can. Yeah. You can do whatever you want.
Exactly.
Matt could fire me right now on the spot. Are you going to?
I hadn't thought about that. Well, now you've put the idea in my head.
Speaking of ideas, do we have any other ideas before we get to the big kahuna of the whole thing?
Which would be the True Romance interviews?
I think vis-a-vis that.
I think we're good. I definitely want to give a language warning. There is some swearing here.
NSFW.
Yes, exactly. I mean, not that you would necessarily play a True Romance junket for your kids, but, it's not the Barney movie. But just in case, you're listening to it in your car and your kids are on, sitting there with you, be aware there's some swearing.
And just a reminder, folks, before we get into the Patricia Arquette interview, at this time in 1993, she was still establishing herself as an actress. This was years before.
Yeah, back then, she was still kind of mostly known as Rosanna's sister.
Right, yeah, Rosanna Arquette. No, before True Romance, her previous credits were Troublebound, Ethan Frome, that starred Liam Neeson, nobody saw that movie, an indie film called Inside Monkey Zetterland. She starred in the Sean Penn film, The Indian Runner. Matt, you're looking at me like you have a little punchline you're going to throw right at me.
What are you
going to do?
Your recall is amazing.
It's not like I'm looking at IMDb.
No.
I'm not just an IMDb guy here,
Your
right?
brain is like an encyclopedia. It's so impressive.
Thank you, sir. As I scroll down through my mind, let me tell you, folks, so True Romance really established her, in my opinion, as a possible leading lady, because after True Romance, she went on to have a solid leading actress career throughout the 90s.
So let's hear what she sounded like in 1993 as she was promoting True Romance. here we go.
Here we go.
Making trouble? Thanks.
Good morning, Alabama. How are you this morning?
Fine, thank you.
This is the kind of part that everybody in town must have been dying to play. How did you get it?
I don't know. I don't know. You know, the script kept coming back around to me. I'd read it a couple years ago, and then it didn't get made. It all fell apart. And then somebody told me, hey, did you read the script? You'd be perfect for it. And I went to my friend Tim Roth's birthday party, and I met Quentin, and he goes, you would be perfect for Alabama. Okay, well, that sounds nice. I didn't even know what the hell he was talking about. And it just kept coming back around and back around and back around. And then finally I met Tony, and yeah, I got the chance.
Oh, what sort of a period was this? From the time you first saw it to when it disappeared? And
Couple years. Yeah. I mean, it even went to the extent that a guy in New York, Harvey Weinstein, called my friend Valeria, who called me to say, Harvey thinks that you would be perfect for this movie that someone else is making. I mean, it was like, wow, really neat.
Did you ever wonder why they thought you'd be perfect for this part? I mean, is Alabama you?
No, but there's things about her that I understand, because I've known people like her, and there's certain parts of her that are a lot like me,
Like?
or like I was. Well, I think at this point in my life, I don't have such a need for a man, and a lot of characters I play are very deeply connected to their relationship with men. And she's a person who, even before Clarence, has a strange, twisted relationship with men, a need of that. And I myself, for better or for worse, don't really have that anymore.
But you went through it.
Yeah, and I think everyone does. So I don't feel like I'm some special person with some special understanding of that.
How was this character described to you when they first brought it to you, and how did you make it your own?
Well, I read the script, and a lot of who I played was in the script to begin with. And then, you know, there was just a lot of questions that come up in a good, well-written piece when you're working on developing the character. Questions of, what does she think about this? What does she think about that? Why is her sexuality the way it is? What happened to her? How does she feel about this, that, you know? So my character just developed by just figuring out who they were, you know? How they would react in certain situations because of their history.
If you don't connect with Christian, there's not. Did it work from the beginning with you and Christian? I mean.
Yeah, it did, because he's very open, really nice guy, very personable. It wasn't like, oh man, you know, how am I going to get this other person to care about work? How am I going to get this other person to share with me in work and to listen to me when we're in a scene together, you know, and not just be kind of trying to show the good side, or, you know what I mean? It was never an issue.
Is the Ding Dong story true?
Oh my God, I so badly regret saying that, because so many people have asked me, and all it boiled down to is, when you shoot a scene, you might shoot that same scene for days, or you might just shoot it, you know, many times that day. And at certain points, you just come up against, man, you're just so bored of doing that scene, or not bored of it, but getting into some stale areas that you have a habit of doing the same thing. So we just were trying to freak each other out in the scene, you know. I was spilling ice water on him, and we put a ding-dong between us, and we're squishing it. You know, it was like our little secret. We had our little secret. But we like to have stuff like that because at certain times I wanted to be whispering to him things that you could never hear. Because sometimes you're with their relationship, and sometimes you're pushed out of their relationship. And there's things going on, you don't know what's going on, you know, but it's always there together.
Was Wardrobe a little upset?
Oh, they were so funny. They're like, oh, Patricia, you have a ding-dong hanging on your T-shirt. You know, I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. They were like, it's okay.
Do you need to do stuff like that to kind of keep the interest up when you're on your umpteenth take?
No, it's not something I'm really proud of, because in a way it's like, you know, in acting you just want to really be there, but no, sometimes it's good just to throw something at someone from left field, and sometimes off camera people when somebody else is on camera, and you know where they want to go because you have a connection, and you're sensitive to each other, and you know where they've been trying to get to and stuff. You could say different things off camera to help them get there, And I've actually had producers say, well, doesn't she know her lines? What is she saying off camera? And you're saying it because the other person has heard it 100 million times, and they want to hear some, But can't expect everyone to understand, I guess.
Just wondering how it feels to be the only girl on the island as well. So many guys around and...
Swell. No.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really have like a big competition thing with girls. I love women. All my best friends are women. So, but it was just great. I mean, I would have worked, there's a zillion amazing actors I'd love to work with, male and female. But it was a great experience, and it was like perfect. Nothing could have been better.
Was there anything in Alabama that you added? I mean, yes, there's a script there, and yes, it gives you an idea, but I mean, how much were you allowed to sort of play with? You say you added.
I think Tony gave me a lot of freedom. I mean, I'd say, Tony, what do you think of this idea? Let me think about it. And he'd run off and do whatever he had to do to set up the shot, and then he'd come back. Yeah, Bama, let's do it. Ready, Bama Doobery? Let's go. Or sometimes he'd come up to me and say, I don't think so because of this reason. But he really thought about it. He never copped an attitude, which I'm sorry, but a lot of male directors have. It's just a power situation. And when you approach them, you can either like or not like this idea, but here's an idea. Just for the sake of keeping their power, it's like, no, we can't do that because of this, because I know more than you do. You know what I mean? Basically is what's underneath it.
That's not just a directorial thing, it's more of a male thing, you think?
No, I don't. I think it's more a directorial thing. I mean, it wasn't a case with Diane Keaton, but I've run across that with women as well. I think it's a matter of having to be so much in control of such a huge part of the movie that maybe you just go overboard. But even Tony, sometimes he'd go, no, let's not do that. And then later he'd come up and say, let's do that again your way because I was wrong. And it takes a big person, man or woman, to be able to say, yeah. It's very supportive of your creative process. Because whenever I work, I just throw out a lot of things. Some are absolutely insane, some make sense. But I don't want to censor myself. Because when you start censoring yourself, then you have such a small window of ideas. You know what I mean? I'd rather go on a set and have everyone think I'm absolutely crackerjacks insane. Because then they give me more freedom to move either way. They don't say, oh, you know what, my whole boundaries are so much wider than everyone else's that I can go to town.
Because there's a wonderful moment when you confront a gangster that you know is going to do horrible things to you, and you laugh. Was that you, or was that the script in the motel room,
Not at the beginning of the scene.
Yeah,
in the middle of the fight?
At the beginning of the scene, You're like, so totally...
Well, we added some lines there, and, but a lot of the stuff was there about, oh, my husband is at football practice, he's going to be home soon. But we added the stuff like, nice outfit, thanks, I got it, and, throwing the cigarettes on the bed, and would you like a cigarette? We added all that stuff, sort of like, because I was thinking, well, when she comes to this situation, you know right away you can't leave, this guy's got a gun on you, so what are you going to do? You're just going to buy time, however crafty you have to be about getting it. Maybe you can, and I've noticed with a lot of women, even myself, sometimes I've run across a complete lunatic or someone very violent, wherever it is, maybe in a restaurant or coffee shop or something. And usually my tendency, and a lot of people I know, is to sort of revert to this very politeness because you just don't know what's going to set them off. So it's almost like being a 4-year-old. They could say something very scary to you. Oh, well, thank you very much. Because you just don't know what's going to set them off, and you think maybe you could squeeze your way out by being charming. So I sort of thought I wanted to try that.
Patricia, I was wondering, how comfortable were you filming the nude scene?
Not very comfortable. I was comfortable on this, but in theory, not very comfortable. I mean, there's certain nudity in films that I think really make sense, like Jessica Lange and Francis when they break into her apartment, and she's naked. And it's not about titillating nudity is usually bothersome to me because it creates this whole image that people think should be sex, but it's all very choreographed in movies, you know, and lit very well and everything. It's not real life. It's not, here I am with you and we're together in this. It's like people tend to start having fantasy lives that are more, they're more attached to their fantasy life than the lover they're really with, you know, and I didn't really want to continue that. And I was talking to my friend Valeria Galino, because there was a really nude scene in this, and I said, what do you think, man? I'm freaked out. I don't know if it's the right thing to do, you know. She said, tell Tony this. You could say you said it, man. She said, you tell him, I don't mind being upstaged by good acting, but I don't want to be upstaged by my own tits, man. Because it's true. Someone will stare at your tits all of a sudden. But, you know, I try to think about everything. Like, okay, so someone sees your boobs. Yeah, so a lot of strangers see your boobs. How does that make you feel? Then they have that image with them. They can do whatever they care for with it. Or, so you don't have these little silicone boobs. Maybe that's a good thing to show. Maybe it's good for women to see real boobs. And maybe it's good for them to say, my tits are as nice as her tits. What's the big deal? You know? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly a natural thing, but it does get confused.
As you were.
I wasn't relaxed. Wait a second. We were both so nervous. There's a shot you don't really, you just see our naked backs on the edge of the bed, but we had to be naked, right? So we had these towels over us right before we went, and we're holding them, like clutching them, white knuckling them, you know? And we're staring at each other, and we're panic-ridden like roadkill or something. And we're about to throw these towels off, and I look at him, I grab his chin, I'm like, don't look down. Swear to me you only look in my eyes. He's like, you swear to me you only look in my eyes. You know, he was as petrified as I was. It was like the Dr. Seuss, the man with pale green pants with nobody inside him. We were both terrified. We flung off our coats and, you know, our eyes were drilled into each other. There was no deviation from that.
In the version of the script I read, there was no lovemaking scene. It came in on you both laying in bed afterwards, but there was no lovemaking scene. Was that sprung on you after you signed in, or was it a surprise they decided to do that, or was it?
No, I knew that. Maybe I read a later script than you did. I don't know. I knew that.
Patricia, I was interested in how it was for you having to film that motel room scene where Alabama gets just so beaten up. But it's neat that she comes back and gets the best of her attacker, which you don't often see, you know, women have an opportunity to do that in the movies. What was that experience like for you? And did Alabama do kind of what you, perhaps, if you were ever in such a horrible situation, did she react in the same way you think you possibly might react?
Let me answer that in just 1 second. I just want to finish one thing about this whole sexuality thing. I just wanted to say that another thing I liked about the sexuality is that when you're young and you're passionate and you're in love, there's nothing wrong with making love everywhere. There's nothing that can stop you from making love everywhere. You know, it's just impossible. So I liked sometimes you're with them in the story and then sometimes you're forced out. Like, you can only be a voyeur because you know you can only be a voyeur, but you can watch what's going on and maybe be envious, but that's the most of it. So I felt good about that kind of passion. I don't feel there's anything wrong with that kind of lust. But what you were saying about Alabama, what would I have done in that situation?
You were talking earlier about how, you know, the sort of the biding your time and the turning on the polite charm, but during the actual fighting, which was really pretty tough to watch, was it difficult for you personally? And do you feel that Alabama reacted in a way, in terms of during the fight, that if you were ever in a situation like that, you might be able to
My
pull
God,
through?
please never put me in a situation like that. And I don't want any cuckoo bird thinking that I like that. You know what I mean? I don't know what I would do in that situation. I mean, that's like, what would you do if you were on a cliff and someone said, your best friend or you is going to die? Which one? I mean, sure, we could say, I would say me. But who knows in that situation really what you would do? And each person would do something different, and you're playing a different character than you. So I don't know what I would have done. You know, I really don't know what I would have done. I know that one time I was held up by a gun point with my friend in the car, and our other friend went to make a phone call. So she was on her way back, and I knew that. And this woman was really whacked out on something, and she kept pulling this gun out of her bag and pointing it at us and saying, okay, open the door. And I'd say, okay, I'm going to start opening the door now. I'd start opening, and she'd slam it shut and say, what are you doing? And she'd say, open the door. I'd say, okay, I'm going to open the door now, okay? I'd start opening it. She'd slam it and say, what are you trying to do? You know, it's very scary to have a gun pointed at your head and this going on. And she was trying to get our jewelry from us, and my friend had this little cheap bracelet her boyfriend had made on her. You know, there was no clasp. She's like, no, this is sentimental. It was like a comedy show. I'm like trying to yank her bracelet off my friend, just give her the damn thing, I don't give a crap. And she's like, don't help her out. I'm like, she's got a gun. Oh, it was just a comedy show. She's like going, it's not worth anything. You don't want it. It's only worth... I'm just ripping it off my friend, you know, giving it to this woman. But I know my instinct was to get her out of there before a friend came back. And I knew Alabama knew Clarence was coming back. And I think a part of her did wish to be rescued for a man by a moment. Maybe if he came, he's got a gun, I won't have to do this. You know what I mean? Because once you kill someone, you never can go back. You can never not have that memory. You're changed for life. But I wanted to show, too, that so many movies we see men come in a room, the bad guy says something, he gets shot, fall down. And that's how easy you rub out life. But the thing I love about Quentin's violence is he gets you to know the characters, and you feel a death when a death occurs. It's not just like, oh, these 40 bad guys come in and they're all mowed down, and that's fine and clean. It's not clean. There's always something you liked about each person and something you miss about them. So, I don't know.
There's also that moment, though, where you have to confront the fact that he's going to mess up your face probably really bad, or would like to, before he kills you. And your face does get messed up pretty bad. Did that make, I mean, you know, as good an actress as you are, you know, the fact that you're also a beautiful woman did it make you think about...
I think she's been hit before, so it's not such a mystery to be hit. It's more a matter of, this is escalating. You know it's life or death. It's not a matter of getting a messy face. And each is as ugly as the other. There's a point, I think, where it's, what I was trying to get to was, for this woman, that is a painful decision to arrive to decide she would have to take someone else's life. To decide that she would have to do that is emotionally painful for her. That he would force her into that decision, you know, and of course at that decision she sort of cracks like, all right, I've got to go over the edge because I can't logically be here and now. I have to do this to survive. You know what I mean? I can no longer stay in this room as I was. I have to be something new now.
How much of that scene did you have to do in the motel room?
I did a lot of it. My friend Joni Avery is a stunt woman, and she's really a good double for me. She's got same like chin line, and so you see her quite a bit more than you think. But she went through the shower. She got banged against the wall, and you know, she was there the whole time, giving us safe ways to do things. So I was happy to have that. You know, we all got scratched up a little, and she certainly got the worst of it.
What was that shootout like at the end?
That was really weird, because a lot of people were not in the room when other people were in the room, because for security, for safety reasons, everyone wants to be so safe. You know, everyone's so afraid of any kind of accident or anyone getting hurt that it was all very isolated in sections. It was pretty confusing, I mean, through walkthroughs and stuff, all these million people, like, hey, what are we gonna do here? That's pretty confusing. But, you know, they were very... these guys knew what they were doing so well that it was, I felt pretty confident, definitely confident.
Your character from the beginning seems to tell a narrative of a person that is just born to be a survivor. And is that part of you as a person? I mean, I
know I learned early on to survive at certain things, but we all did. It's like, what do you think's charming about yourself? What have you heard is funny about yourself? What have you heard is your most attractive feature? Those are the things we all use in situations to manipulate people to get them to love us, to get our way. So I don't know. So much of who you decide you are and what's good about you is through other people's eyes, just from when you're born. What a cute baby, such fat cheeks. What a this, what a that. You're a smart little girl. You're a pretty little girl. Oh, you're very good at drawing. Whatever it is, you know, that helps you become who you are, and that I don't know how I would say that. I don't think anyone could survive childhood without being a survivor.
Do Was it tougher for you coming from a family of performers to make it as an actress? Does that
No,
make
it
it
was
easier or
probably easier because it's very difficult for very talented actors to get an agent, to get into casting meetings, just to get that chance, to start off with. People were welcoming me in to meet me. Not that they were going to hand me a part, but they were interested in seeing me. So I had that, and that takes you a long way, I know a lot of amazing actors that just cannot get in the door.
You're a mom, right?
Mm-hmm.
How is it combining career and motherhood? I mean, we hear...
It can be really hard. My son's in the movie. He's at the very end. He's the little baby Elvis that we're playing with on the beach. So that's nice. We have these little, things to document us. But when you work on movies, you work so many hours for so long, and it's very hard. Because he's very active and very verbal, I hate saying to him, you have to be quiet, you can't run around, you can't do this, you can't do that, I love that he's a wild savage. I think he should be, When I see little kids just staring off into space and they're little, it makes me so sad because something has killed already their need to explore. But then also I'm very lucky because most people have to work, both parents, all the time. And because of the money I can make in this profession, I can then after a movie take a month and a half off, 2 months off, and just stay with him every minute, So.
Next time, right, you go to a quieter movie, Ed Wood.
Yeah.
What's your role going to be in that?
Kathy Wood. But I can't talk about that. I can't talk about my character because I still have a lot to learn about it. You know what I mean? I would be deciding beforehand who I am.
Was Kathy living with him at the end of his life when
Yeah.
they were drinking and boozing
Yeah.
it?
And I'm going to meet her. I'm really excited next weekend.
Yeah. They've started shooting already, right?
Yeah.
In Hollywood. Have you been involved in any of the exteriors, any of the location stuff?
No.
What do you think about wearing? What do you think about all the 50s period piece stuff you're going to get to do?
I'm excited about it. I like wearing period stuff. It's really neat, I think.
Has Johnny shown you any of his Angora sweaters yet? Or?
No, not yet. But I'm going to try to get him to show me some.
Were you at all concerned that it wasn't going to happen since it was what was originally with Columbia and they decided to put it in Turner?
I'm always concerned when I read something that I think is really different, that I think is really amazing, that it will fall apart. Because it takes a lot of money to put into a piece like this, and a lot of people don't want to gamble with so many millions of dollars, even if they would be proud of the movie afterwards. So, but no, I just was so excited about meeting Tim Burton and getting a chance to work with him, or even a hope of ever working with him, and a sort of mutual decision, yeah, we want to work together. That, I just kept my fingers crossed. And
while he may
What's
not
so
be a
strange?
transvestite, Burton certainly has a reputation for being eccentric. Have you noticed anything like that in him?
I don't know. The things that I noticed about him is he seemed like a very warm, happy, very loving, very caring, very feeling, and passionate man about his work. And I guess that's pretty eccentric.
We have one more minute.
There's a moment early on in this film when Clarence describes shooting the pimp, and you say, "That's so romantic." What can you describe? What you were putting into that scene?
That was a really hard scene for me to do. But there was a couple things going on. One was, wow, that's so romantic. Nobody's ever cared to touch anything that's ever hurt me before. No one's ever cared to erase all my demons, to erase my past, and not hold me accountable. Not even for 1 second does he say to her, who did you sleep with? Why did you sleep with them? What's wrong with you, you little tramp? He never judges her about it. But he knows this man hurt her. When she's talking about Arlene in the tattoo parlor, she's talking about herself. She's recreating herself all the time. And he knows she's talking about herself.
So why was it hard for you?
It was hard for me because of that, and it was hard for me the same reason of, here's this man, I know I love him. I know this is good, but also, he killed someone. Who is he? You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know what you're capable of, what you will be like now. I'll always know this about you now, too. You know, how do people react when they hear something like that? Do they run the other way like, stay away from me, stay away from me? Or do they cling on to you like, okay, yes, we're going to be together? You know what I mean? What is your technique for survival? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that was Patricia Arquette. Now, towards the end, it was a little bit hard to hear it, but the movie that she was talking about was Ed Wood. So when Bob Healy asked her, has Johnny shown you any of his Angora sweaters yet? He meant Johnny Depp.
Yeah. And if you haven't seen Ed Wood, it's a classic. I think one of Tim Burton's best films. Do you agree or not? No?
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
Shot in black and white. I also liked how, rest in peace, Tony Scott, how Patricia Arquette said he never copped an attitude during the production. That was really nice.
Yeah.
You know, she talked about that during the interview, so that was cool.
Some directors can be difficult to work with. We never heard that about Tony Scott.
Yeah. And he was always a great interview, so... so...
And a good filmmaker.
A very good filmmaker.
We'll get to him later, I think. Later today. I can't remember. Yes, later today.
Later today.
I don't even know what our own shows are.
What's going on with that?
Yes, we'll hear from Tony Scott later. But first, we're going to hear from another guy who passed away since this junket happened, Dennis Hopper. Sadly, he died on May 29th, 2010, at the age of 74. You would know that if you were open to the right page, in your mind.
In my mind, I never go to IMDb, sir.
Just to set it up right at the very beginning of the interview, he starts talking about how he had just directed a movie, but it didn't have a name at the time, but that was Chasers, with Tom Berenger and Erica
Eleniak.
There you go.
And William McNamara was also in that. But no, this is a very good... I don't want to do... Should we give some more spoilers on what Hopper's going to talk about? It's going to be a big treat that listeners are going to listen to.
Well, you know, at one point, he does refer to Heidi Fleiss. At the time, she was very big in the news. If you don't know who she is, ask your dad.
Yes. And a little aside, if you will permit me the aside, I did interview Heidi Fleiss years ago on the 3rd Street Promenade.
Really?
She was opening up an ice cream store, and I was there to interview her.
Is that a euphemism?
No, that's not. This is a clean show, folks. It's not a euphemism. It was a real ice.
So it was actually ice cream.
Yes,
but that has nothing to do with this Dennis Hopper interview. So.
He liked ice cream. That has something to do with it. No, has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I don't know. Did he?
I have no idea. But we are going to know a lot more from this interview with Dennis Hopper regarding his style of directing. And there's a big movie that he's going to talk about that I think we're not going to talk about it right now. Maybe at the wraparound.
Okay, so let's get to it then. Dennis Hopper.
Vroom vroom.
First of all, it's good to see you working again.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't seen you in a while.
All right.
Yeah. Were you satisfied with your death? I noticed that you departed a few minutes after last night.
Yeah, I like this movie a lot, man. I really like it. So I just directed a movie, and I'd only seen the film once in Wilmington, and I had I'm using the same editor, Chris Wagner, on my film, and I'm making my film for the same company, Morgan Creek. So they sent a copy down finally to Wilmington, so I could see it, and I just saw it one night with the crew. So I wanted to just sort of check it again and see if I had all my sensibilities together.
Everybody talks about Quentin's, great characters, great dialogue. Does that mean you don't have to prepare as much for a character in a Quentin?
You have to learn lines, man. I mean, he writes speeches. Who's ever heard of speeches these days in movies? I never. It's amazing. You go, a director or producers look at speeches, they go, my God, cut this down to 3 lines, No, I spent most of the days just learning the lines. Chris Walken said it was like Elizabethan. It's like Shakespeare's soliloquies. But it's a lot of words. It's wonderful to act, though. It's really, he's got the voice. It's really interesting.
The script has been around for a while. Were you made aware of it very early on, or did you come into it fairly late?
Well, I probably came into it late because there were a lot of other people on board. I was told about it by my agency, CAA, and said that they'd like me to be in it. And I had been doing people favors by playing small parts in their movies, because there are a lot of guys that are directing their first films and so on. I had been offered to be in Reservoir Dogs, actually. Harvey Keitel had asked me to be in Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs, and I was doing something else, and I couldn't be in it. But anyway, I said, how big's the part? And they said, very small. I said, I can't do another small part. And so I just turned it down without knowing what it was. And they said, well, Tony Scott's directing it, who is socially a friend and somebody I admired. And I said, really? They said, Tarantino script. I said, really? And they said, Brad, we want to put you all under an umbrella. Brad Pitt, Gary Oldman, Chris Walken, Val Kilmer, and yourself, like you all work 6 days and you get very little money. Yeah. And I said, well, let me read it. And I read it. And, you know, the wonderful thing is these things are character-driven pieces. They're not like, you know, so much exposition and plot as most of the films you see. And these characters have their own little lives. They have beginning, middle, and ends inside these bigger stories. So I was, in my part, I thought it was really, really quite a wonderful part. So...
Just also wondering how you feel about going out and facing the public now, where after your story about the Sicilian...
Yeah, it's a hard one, man, but, you know, I mean, was I lying? I think, you know, listen, you know, you get it, you know. And the man had one way out of there, didn't he? He either gave up his son or got this guy so angry the guy killed him. And it seemed to be successful. And it's just as pathetic as it is, right?
It looked like you and Chris, I mean, that's a scene that's destined to be a classic.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to see that come back again and again. It looked like you both really had fun playing that.
Yeah. Well, it was wonderful working with him. He says, you know, he was a professional dancer. And he said, when you dance, it's not like that you're both great dancers. It's how well you're doing with your partner, you know. And he said that we really danced well together. But it was really terrific. We're both Strasberg babies, and we both came in with no preconceived ideas. We knew who our characters were, but we had no preconceived idea how it was going to come out or what the result of the scene was going to be. So. Playing moment-to-moment reality. I mean, who would have ever thought that we would end up laughing, you know, or that we've been almost as if we were really enjoying each other's company when I was telling my story. And and basically both of us were very kept to Tarantino's words. There was only 3 lines that I know of that were improv, and one was that means you're part eggplant, and he says, yeah, you're a cantaloupe, right? And then he says, how can you love a guy like this? Those are the only 3 lines. The rest are all Tarantino's, to the huhs, buts, whatever. I mean, we did it just as written. So it was Tony Scott. I can't praise enough. I mean, he made an environment and an ambiance that was just wonderful to work in, encouraged us. I mean, there wasn't a hell of a lot of blocking. I was sitting in a chair and he was sitting and standing, and we went for it. And it was just, we got into a zone and the subconscious kicked in, and it was just, it was a wonderful day of acting. I really had a good time.
That scene in particular, and the movie as a whole, did a lot of the sort of the juxtaposition of humor and then intense violence. What kind of effect do you think that has on an audience as opposed to a movie that's kind of, you know, pretty serious throughout if it's depicting violence like that?
I don't know. I hope that this witch hunt on violence in film doesn't get too crazy right now, because I think this is a really wonderful movie. I mean, besides myself being in it, and I'm really proud of my work in it, I really like this movie. I think this movie is looks at our culture in sort of a wearing blender, and I think at best that, and I think it's very entertaining, but to talk about art, serious art for 1 second, you know, I mean, art has to reflect the time that you live in, and it has to make a comment on the time that you live in. And this film does that. It makes a comment about where I live, the time I'm living, what's going on in the world that I live in, and I think it's an important document. It certainly doesn't show all of life, but it shows a great deal of life in a Waring blender, and it's funny, and it's tongue in cheek, and yet there's some very serious problems that it brings out. You know.
No,
You use the
as an
word-
actor, as a director, how do you feel about the possible threat of government control or some body in Washington saying, "I'm sorry, but you can't do that"?
I just can't believe that we're going to change the First Amendment. I just can't. That would have to be that kind of thing. I mean, this is like the only thing they can do is intimidate. They can intimidate an industry that makes their money from entertainment, and that's probably a pretty easy thing to do. So, like, you know, but they can't change the First Amendment. I just can't believe that that's possible. I hope it's not possible, because we'll all be in deep shit.
You use the words witch hunt on violence. Do you think it's sort of hypocritical that people will accept seeing this on their evening news shows, but when it's in film, then they start to go overboard about it?
I don't know. I mean, I find like right at the moment, I mean, the Heidi, whatever her last name is, I don't know, Heidi, whatever, yeah, right. The Heidi, let's look for hookers. I mean, suddenly Hollywood's got morals. I mean, wait a second, hold it here for a second, you know, and then what, the violence, we're going to stop, Congress comes in, we're going to stop violence in movies. I mean, okay, fine. But like, you know, I mean, I really, if you get down to it, you know, I think that maybe people ought to look at the cartoons that kids see in the morning. I mean, the cartoons have more violence in them, and that's pre anything, man. That's what you turn on in the morning. You got Monster Mash and, you know, I mean, zapping people with ray gun. I mean, you know, you got some real heavy violence stuff going on at that level. I mean, these things are R-rated. I mean, this is for people who are supposed to be 17 or older and go in and see a movie, and they either want to see it or not. Yesterday I said, I got so tired of the violence thing, I finally cracked at one moment after hours of this, and I finally said, look, I said, I think the 9, 10, 11-year-olds should be made to check their guns at the door. And I think the 12, 13, and 14s probably should be left alone because they might start using their guns to get inside, and we don't want any violence in the theaters. You know, I don't know. What am I going to answer to this?
You make a lot of good points about violence. I was just kind of curious, though, about the laughter that preceded some of the bloodbath scenes, like before your character is killed, before the final shootout. I mean, we're all laughing because here come the gangsters, you know, and the cops are already there, and the henchmen. And do you think that it kind of makes more of a roller coaster for the audience, or do you think it makes it kind of like a little bit easier to accept the blood?
I saw a great movie. It's called Menace to Society. I saw it, and I saw it with an all-black audience. I saw it in Wilmington, North Carolina. And they were laughing when they shot a Korean grocer. And I went, wow, man, like, you know, and I knew I was in a great movie. I mean, this is a great movie. This is a great movie, and it's full of violence. I don't know whether anybody here has seen it, but, I mean, it's a great movie. These guys, the two brothers, Hudson, I don't know who they are. They're a couple of black twins, Hughes. I mean, they're filmmakers. And this is a glimpse of society that we just don't see, you know? So, like, you know, I mean, I think that this kind of laughter is, who knows where it comes from? I don't think it's, I think it's a release of kinds, and I think it's things that we don't see, but in our subconscious we know really happen, and so we have to deal with it in some way, you know? But, I mean, I think these films are really important to see and work out. A lot better than some big action movie where the violence is just violence because it's on some sort of grand heroic scale that has absolutely no social redeeming. They're not human. So it's not a human thing. These are very human movies.
At this point in your career, you know, to say you're a legend is not understating it. When you walk on a set now, even in a small part, I mean, people are saying, my God, there's Dennis Hopper. Do you feel any pressure to deliver a Dennis Hopper caliber performance every time out, or do you just put that out of your head?
No, just when I'm looking for socks and underwear and I suddenly look up and I see people going, I go, I wonder if I stole something, and I realize they're looking at me. No, I don't, you know, I don't even know what that means, man. I just, you know, I just get dressed and get out every day, hopefully. I can't even imagine what that means.
But you know people.
I mean, I heard it, yeah, but I can't deal with it. I don't know what legend. Must be legend. I was out of work all those years or something. I figure if you live long enough, you can hear almost anything. Yeah.
You're talking about Tony's way of directing, Tony's style of directing. How would you describe your style?
How would I describe it? Well, I think that any good director tries to get, if they have good actors, try to get out of their way. I do, as a director, and try to set up a situation where they're comfortable and block it and shoot it in a way that's comfortable for everybody, and so that you don't just get out of their way. Doesn't mean that you give them totally the set, but you help them and then make them comfortable and then get out of their way and let them do the work. And I work that way. Tony works that way.
Patricia was saying there's a lot of dialogue with Tony that, she would suggest things and he would go away and come back. So there's a lot of give and take.
Well, that may be with Patricia. I don't direct actors that way, and I don't intellectualize about things, and I don't have different ways that I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I try to relax and know my character and play a moment-to-moment reality and have no preconceived ideas and let it flow. Try to get into a zone where the subconscious kicks in and you just go moment to moment. So that's a little maybe different than the way Patricia works. And Patricia is an incredibly gifted actress. I think she's really wonderful. But I don't have dialogue with. I can't stand talking about acting to anybody, really, about how I'm going to play the scene or what to say. I don't know. I don't want to know how I'm going to play the scene. It might make me nervous. So I don't have those kind of conversations. Some actors like to have those kind of conversations. When they come to me, I say, well, I'm not the guy. As a director, I say, I don't really. Just do it, okay?
But people must come to you, like you're saying, because you have the stature that you have and want to ask you questions about acting. What would you, do you have advice for them? Or
I say things like, just do it, don't show it. I got some glib answers,
I saw a couple of lines in an Army's column or whatever the other day about Easy Rider coming back, another episode that. Now, had you seen this?
How many years has it been? 25 years?
Something like
Every year it's coming. There's going to be another Easy Rider.
Yeah. But I think it was an Army's column.
Yeah, well, supposedly there's going to be an Easy Rider too. And and there's a company raising the money to do Easy Rider 2. And something, the day they get the money together, I'm going to be there. But boy, they better hurry, because Jack Nicholson, every year the price goes up, and I'm telling you, man, pretty soon, he'll be really beyond, I don't know, you have to buy a studio to I don't know.
He could bankroll it, couldn't he?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but he's not going to. He could also buy another house. He's still in the same house he was in when we made Easy Rider. So, he just is the richest man. He's not. He is. He's still living in the house that he bought when we were doing Easy Rider.
But have they been to you about any? I see that maybe you might even be involved in the script.
Yeah. Well, I would say, there's been a lot of scripts. This is this year's script. Yeah, there's a script. We finally got them out of Biker's Heaven, because the old script used to be in. The script was they were in Biker's Heaven. They went to Biker's Heaven, and and there was a nuclear holocaust, and the leader had to get a couple of people to go back and straighten things out in America because they'd lost their flag, they'd lost their colors, they lost their country, but they hadn't lost the war. And but they were just all these bike gangs all over, but nobody in Biker's Heaven could really there were a couple of loners down there on a road that they had to get and bring back to life to go and find the flag. And okay, we got rid of that one. So now it seems that when Peter was in the cemetery, when on the acid trip, and the young hooker was saying, "I want to conceive a child. God help me conceive a child." She did. And there's a Bridget Fonda in New York City who's been adopted, who has no idea that her parents were really a hooker and a biker. and her adopted parents are in a break-in robbery or brutally murdered, and she goes through papers and finds that she was adopted and finds that there was some uncle who turns out to be the brother of Jack's character, who is a senator in Washington who knew their family, and he directs her through, and she starts making the trip that seemingly got to the cemetery in New Orleans, back
Didn't
through.
you and Jack ever say, we don't need a sequel to this one, it's a classic, let's leave it alone?
There was one time that Jack wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it, and Peter decided that it was a classic and that it would be a piece of shit, and that he might only leave one thing of any value, and he's not going to, mar the image of Easy Rider. So so Jack and I were all ready to go, and Peter said no. There was another time that we were all ready to go, and I said, I don't think so. And then the last time Jack said, are we sure we want to do this? So this is we've all done our no, and and so, but it never really ever got to a situation where we really ever had the money in place, or, it's just, we've just got nothing else to do. Yeah? But just continue this on? Yeah.
I have a question for you. You were associated with the Counterculture and Rebellion. I was wondering how you have mellowed as you've matured. Or if you have. Aside from the drugs.
Besides from not taking drugs anymore?
Idealistically, perhaps.
I don't know. I really don't know. I've gotten older, I guess. My life has changed so much through and the world that I live in. I mean, when I started out in the late 50s, early 60s, I was with Martin Luther King, and I was a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee with SNCC, and I was marching and doing all that stuff, and my life has gone through, and then I was against the war in Vietnam, and it's gone back. It's gone through so many changes and so much stuff. I don't know,
Do you still hold the same ideals that you did back in the 60s as you do today?
The same? Well, I like to think I'm the same person. My feelings about things have changed somewhat, But not, they've just changed with the time, I think.
In what ways?
Wow, I don't even know. I'm much more of a conservative now than I was then, politically and otherwise. Yeah, I'm really. I'm caught between. I was very much of a socialist during the 60s, and I'm very much against big government controlling right at the moment. I see it being nothing but a disaster most of the time. That the more they impose laws and rules, the more we pay and the more our freedom is taken away. And so I'm sort of caught between that kind of question. And it's just a personal question. It's not a big political thing that I'm out marching, but I have to rethink a lot of things almost daily on those levels.
Are there issues that you feel concerned enough about to want to get out and march again about them?
Not right away. I'm disappointed in a lot of things. I'm disappointed in a lot of things that I stood for, that I've seen become caught in traps, and disappointed in a lot of movements and a lot of things. But there's not really anything that I feel I can, right at this moment, that I can make change about, I really would like to do my work and be able to, there's enough problems just trying to get the kind of material that I want to do made into films. That's really a lot of effort and problems right now. And the bigger the companies get, the harder it is. The more the world, the distributions, independent films are practically non-existent again. One more time. So, and if you make films and you can't get them distributed, then you can't make films. So it's sort of, everything has sort of gone back to the very process of when I came here in 1954 almost, where the big studios are really controlling all the distribution, so on. But at least at that time, there was a monopoly break. They broke it up, and so the distributors, the filmmakers, couldn't distribute their own films. The distributors were one thing, and the filmmakers were another, and the theaters were owned by another group. But now it's all back together again. It's all a monopoly again. So it's complicated.
Before we lose, you could just touch on Chases.
Pardon?
Last question.
Before we lose, Chases. That's the film.
Yeah. I just directed with Tom Berenger and Erica Liniak and Billy McNamara. And it's for Morgan Creek, the same company that this film's a.
But the type of film? Type of film, drama?
It's a comedy. It's a comedy. Yeah. It's like a Last Detail. It's an old chief, Berenger, and a young kid who's getting out. Billy McNamara is getting out of the Navy the next day, and the computer's screwed up, and send him off on this chaser duty, which is to go and pick up a prisoner. And the Marines dislike the Navy and Berenger, who's been doing this for 18 years, so they played a trick on him. And Toni Mitchell, which they're supposed to pick up, turns out to be a girl. It's Toni, and which one of you is going to be the female escort on this show, and blah, blah, blah. And Charleston says, well, you got to bring her anyway. So they go from Camp Lejeune through the South with this girl in this van locked up in the back, and have a lot of problems.
You ready, Dennis? We need to move.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, we're back. So I apologize for the vroom vroom thing. That was a stupid sound effect. That was just a little thing.
That was the highlight for me.
Oh.
Like, the show doesn't get any better than vroom vroom.
So one of the sad parts of the interview was, I don't know about you, Matt, the idea that an Easy Rider sequel with those principles is really not going to be made anymore.
Well, no, it can't at this point.
Right.
There actually was a sequel made, or a prequel to be precise, called Easy Rider: The Ride Back. It came out in 2013.
Oh.
It starred Rance Howard, Ron Howard's dad, and Jeff Fahey from Lost. And nobody from the original was involved. Wow. And it's got a 23% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it's good.
Wow. I bet you.
23 is a good number, right?
It's great. It's a great. The fact that Bridget Fonda was going to star in Easy Rider 2, that was awesome. It would have been a really, and the whole idea of him, you guys have listened to it, the whole plot of Easy Rider 2 sounded interesting. So anyways, it's great to these are the kind of stories that I love to hear, because you're just never going to hear them at all anywhere. So
yeah, well, especially now he's not around to tell them.
And my favorite line from the Dennis Hopper interview, I wrote this down in my chicken scratch. You have to learn the lines, man.
It's true.
Words to live by.
We should apply some of that here.
Yes, sir. Just to me, not you, Matt. You're doing a great job.
As we jabber on about pretty much nothing.
Yes. What are we going to be jabbering about right now?
Next up, we have Bronson Pinchot, who plays Elliot Blitzer in the film. Of course, most people know him as Balky, although personally, I still remember him from Risky Business.
Oh, look, I'm horrible. I still haven't seen Risky Business. I remember him from Beverly Hills Cop 2 and Perfect Strangers.
Right. Risky Business was long before that. That was 84? 84,
83, one of those years.
He was one of the high school friends, the one who wasn't Curtis Armstrong.
Oh, that was, if memory serves, it was 1983, sir. Risky Business. If memory serves.
From the computer in your mind,
yes,
that is not on your laptop right in front of you.
No, I don't have Chromebooks that tell me things. So
Sure.
Risky Business 1983. So that's where you remember him.
Yes. Here's a fun Risky Business story. I saw that movie with my grandmother. I was 13 years old, and neither of us knew there were going to be sex scenes, and that was not pleasant.
For you or your grandmother? For both?
Both.
For both. Wow.
Oh, it's a nice memory.
What's not sad though?
Yes.
Are these interviews? They're very insightful, I think.
Way to bring it back.
I'm excited for listeners to check out Bronson, because It, like the Linda Fiorentino interview from episode 1 with Men in Black, this is such a darned honest interview.
A little bit of context. At the time that this junket took place, which was August 15th, 1993, he had already shot the finale to the TV series Perfect Strangers, but the finale had not aired yet.
Did not know that. Wow. Okay.
So he talks about that a little bit. He's not exactly sorry to see it go, is he?
No, he's very. This is his cash cow, and he could have said really sweet things about it. But as not going to give too much spoilers, he is very honest about Perfect Strangers.
Yeah, he was ready for it to be done. I don't know that he had any bad feelings towards it. I think it was just time to move on.
He also gives some very honest opinions of a previous TV show he was on with Gina Davis called Sarah.
Right.
Which I thought that was interesting.
Yes, and he's going to talk quite a bit about a TV show called The Trouble with Larry. And at the time he was shooting it, he was excited. This was his next big thing. Didn't last too long. It debuted immediately after the Perfect Strangers finale, like a week later. And it ran for exactly 3 episodes, from August 25th to September 8th. So again, this junket took place on August 15th. The Trouble with Larry started on August 25th and ran 3 weeks. So it started exactly 10 days after this junket. And here's a fun fact. The Trouble with Larry co-starred Courtney Cox.
Oh.
Friends debuted 1 year later in 1994. So if The Trouble with Larry had been a huge hit, Courtney Cox would not have been on Friends.
Amazing. Amazing. Another show I did not watch through the 90s because of our junket universe.
You know, we could do another whole podcast about TV shows you haven't watched.
Right.
That would be fascinating.
But what's more fascinating is this Bronson Pinchot interview that's coming up right around the corner. Matt, do you want to say something before we go right down the strain?
I don't. I think that did it.
Okay, here we go.
All right.
About those people. Huh? No, but you can tell when they've already got enough. They've definitely got their true romance story, and so they're just like basically being nice. This is without a doubt the techno room. Look at you guys.
We look like technocrats, or...
Look at all this headset action.
But the thing is that all our equipment, you can see all our equipment. We don't have anything hidden. Right.
But you know what is so hilarious? I just want there to be 2 more things in this room. I want one person doing it in Swedish into your headphones, and I want someone signing. Okay.
Bronson, we want to know, was that acting when you got off the roller coaster, or did you really get sick?
I'll tell you something. I shot that scene before we did the roller coaster, so it was acting.
But what was it like on the roller coaster?
It's a total hell on earth. It was just the most horrible thing in the world. But it's funny because I remember you always have to shoot out a sequence, and we had to shoot the scene after the roller coaster first. And I thought, well, I know I hate roller coasters, so I know I'll be feeling nauseous. And Tony had put this yellow stupid sweater on me tied like that. And I said, I really hate that, Tony. I hate the sweater. I hate yellow. I don't like the way I look in yellow. You got to remember what actors are like. And I hate a sweater tied. It's just annoying. It's everybody I've ever hated had that. And he said, okay, great. You wear it. And I said, I hate it so much. And my only triumph over that sweater, which I hated, was that when he said, let's do the scene, and I said, don't you think I would be throwing up in this scene? And he said, it's great, man. And I said, and could there be like a glob of throw up on the knot? And he loved it. So in fact, my total revenge on that sweater was because the knot was right there where it would hit. So Tony got a big bran muffin and soaked it in coffee and took like a towel and just dabbed it on himself. And everybody was gagging, but we were howling with laughter. And it was great. This knot that I hated actually became a focus of actual storytelling, just to the glob on it. And then poor Tony got food poisoning, and he spent the whole scene throwing up right behind the camera. So we were both throwing up.
There's actually a couple of scenes, though, where it's missing from the sleeve.
It is not.
Yes.
What?
From here. It's not here.
What are you talking about?
Go back and look at those scenes.
What's missing? The vomit?
Yes.
It is not.
Vomit comes, the vomit goes.
The vomit comes, the vomit goes.
I don't know if they had 2 different sweaters or if they moved the sleeve around, but it's there and it's not. There and it's not. There.
It was here.
No. There's some on the sleeve that's over here.
You guys.
Go back. Go back and look. Continuity. Really
all right.
trapped out there.
Okay.
Moving right along. Who did you base your character on? Could you? I mean, obviously.
I don't do that anymore. I don't do that anymore. People have asked me that. I stopped basing characters on people after Beverly Hills Cop, because that was actually like an out-and-out imitation of a person that I had known. And unless I'm playing an actual person that's lived, unless I'm playing, we did a thing on Perfect Strangers once where I dreamed I was Elvis and I dreamed I was Art Carney. Unless I'm playing a person, I don't do that anymore, because it finally occurred to me that, see, I used to be a personal assistant in New York, and I was Bronson, but I was someone's assistant. So all that meant was I had my soul and my interests and my emotions, but I just took someone's lunch to them. So there's no point in studying assistants, because I could be one myself. So I just said, fine, it's me. You know what I mean? Because the main thrust of the movie is what happens to a person who, what am I saying? That's like that old joke. An actor says, I'm doing Streetcar Named Desire, and what's it about? Well, it's about this doctor that comes in. You know that old joke? Because for me, when I charted out what I had to do in the movie, the main point was what happens to me when I get into this over my head with these drug people. It wasn't about being an assistant. So I didn't base it on anyone.
When you were an assistant,
yes,
did you have experiences and know people where there were producers who plied their stars and clients with drugs?
No, I was not an assistant in showbiz. I was an assistant at American Express, and yeah, I didn't have any. But I mean, I've had assistants of my own. I have never encountered. I haven't encountered. I get into movies in '83, and the great days of obvious public drug trafficking were over. I've heard that earlier you could just see people just sort of traipsing around sets and acting like it was a big party. But by the time I got into film and TV, it was all under the table.
It's all covert.
I never have seen any of it, really, ever, in my lifetime.
And you would tell us if you did, right?
I actually would. I mean, I really had never encountered any of it or seen anything or ever been offered anything. Or it's.
Have you ever met Heidi Fleiss?
Who's that?
The Hollywood Madam.
No.
If you didn't base your assistant on anybody, did you recognize who he was assistant to?
Yeah, I did. Also, Tony, I think, told me a few little facts about somebody that used to be Joel Silver's assistant who actually had a nervous breakdown because he was so maltreated. And he told me a little bit about him. And probably maybe the look, which was totally Tony's. I didn't have anything to do with the look of the character, which is unusual for me. Probably was his memory of that guy.
You're right about playing other people. How does it feel to be playing Larry? Because wasn't that Hagman's going to be Hagman's show?
Yeah, it was pitched. That he's talking about this new show I'm doing called The Trouble with Larry. It was pitched to Larry Hagman. It wasn't written when he said no. The idea was pitched to him and he said no, and then they wrote it, but it's still called Larry. But it suits me perfectly. I mean, it was written with a comic sensibility in mind, not tailor-made for him, and nor is it tailor-made for me, which is what's great about it. Because if you get tailor-made stuff, you start to turn into Red Skelton. I mean, I'm not that kind of performer, but I just do what's there, and it suits me.
What's it about?
It's about. I mean, the plot. There's a plot which is almost like the old My Favorite Wife. I mean, it's I was married to somebody 10 years ago, and we got separated in Africa, and then I come back, and she's married to somebody else, and I move in and cause havoc by being charmant. But what it's really about is just kind of a Groucho Marx for the 90s, somebody who just says whatever comes into his head and gets away with it in a kind of slightly surreal way. That's what it's really about. I mean, the plot does not hit you over the head. It's just somebody who just comes into a given situation and is a loose cannon, and just brilliant things come out of his mouth. And they're British writers, and they have an all new approach to the sitcom. They really write it. They don't give you a script that says you come into the room and then hopefully we'll find something in rehearsal. They just write beautiful scripts.
But you won't be eschewing a physical comedy completely.
No, I won't. But it's very much more clear-cut in this when that's called for and when it isn't, as opposed to Perfect Strangers, where it was kind of part of the fabric of the show was, a little handstand here, a little shoulder roll there. This is pretty tour de force verbal humor, and so you don't want to distract from that. It's very musical, and you can't just put in a pause where you want to and dance around.
Was that kind of a double-edged sword for you, becoming so proficient at physical comedy on Perfect Strangers that people thought only of you as a physical comedian?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I remember when I first started this movie, Tony said, "Bronson, I really love you in this role. I really love the quality, but I'm afraid that you'll be, I don't want you to go for comedy." And I said, I had no intention of doing that. And then when we were shooting it, he said to me, "Don't you want to come up with a few little funny things?" I said, "No, I don't." And it was totally the opposite of what he expected. But there was a little stigma. He thought maybe I was going to shtick it up. And then he many times said to me, I would think, "Aren't you going to do something a little funny?" And I said, "No." He said, "Just a little something." And he was completely thrown.
Speaking of stigma, was a little bit of surge in it too. You kind of got that feeling. You always have that feeling with John C.
I'll have to beat you up now.
It was the sweater that did it.
For you, was it time to end Perfect Strangers, or do you think you could have lived with that?
No, I couldn't have lived with any more of it. There was just plenty for me.
Why do you shudder like that when you recall it?
Because I really had enough. It was a tough experience, and it was very repressed, and very. It was not a happy environment. I was happy to get out.
Tough and repressed
because of the.
Were you not allowed freedom?
I can't explain it too clearly, but it was just. Maybe it was just a function of the fact that when I started the show, I was a 27-year-old who had just had a 2-minute role in a movie that made me a flash in the pan, viable, who is this? And then 7 years later, I had done movies and Broadway plays, and I had expanded my own comic repertoire, and I was still treated like, somebody who should be lucky to have a job, and it just didn't suit me anymore. I was 33 years old, and I had lots more to offer, and the producers had the attitude of, "All right, fine, we've heard enough, thank you, goodbye," and I just didn't like it, and I just outgrew it.
But the usual thing is in TV series like that the person who's so prominent is, I don't say given their head, but allowed.
Well, it didn't happen on that one, and it just was not ideal.
But still, that follows you. I mean, you must walk down the street and still people ask you to do bulky.
Yeah, they do, and I rather cynically say that I've buried him in the backyard and he's decomposed. That's what I say. It doesn't go over too well with 15-year-olds. Actually, delightfully enough, they just ignore it. They just don't get it. They just go, "Do the accent." I say, "No, he's dead and decomposing," and they say, "Do the accent." It just doesn't quite compute.
Have you left accents behind now?
No. I do whatever is see, that's the same thing that almost like that Tony Scott said to me when he said, "Are you going to shtick this up?" I do whatever is required in the role. I was doing slapstick comedy on Perfect Strangers and playing a foreigner. Therefore, an accent and physical comedy were absolutely essential. And the second that I was given something where something else was essential, I did that. So I'm not done with accents. I'm just done with that role. And if somebody says, we want to do a thing about this Australian murderer, well, I'll have to sound Australian and I'll have to look like a murderer. It's just whatever. See, the thing that distorts a career is, if Perfect Strangers had been a movie, I would have done that role and played it the same way, but then it would be over and I would have done 5 more movies by now. But since it runs 7 years, people say, "Oh, that's what he does," which is sad, especially when, as an actor, if you get a little benighted and you think, "Guy, I am this character," then you're in trouble. I mean, that didn't happen to me, but you see what I'm saying? That the sort of 7-year span of it distorts it and makes it look like that's all you can do, because that's all you're visible doing.
In hindsight, would you say that it was a mistake then doing 7 years?
Never. Anyway, it's not your choice. When you sign on, they automatically get you in any sitcom. As a matter of fact, even before you get the role, if they're pretty sure that they like you and you for the role of Balky and they take you into the network, you have to sign a 6-year contract before you even go in. Because to avoid them saying, "Yeah, we want him," and then having him sad to run to do it. So you have to sign up for 6 years the day that you even get under consideration. And then So you do 6, and then they say, could we give you some money, and you do 1 more year, and then you say, fine.
Is that the same situation now with the new sitcom?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have any trepidation about that? Maybe going another...
Do I have trepidation? No, I don't. I love to work. I've done Unperfect Strangers in between 1986 and 1992. I put like 60 hours on film of stuff that varies in between not too embarrassing and really, really good. 60 hours is the equivalent of 30 features, isn't it? So, that's a hell of a lot of screen time and a lot of experience to get. And I mean, who can do 30 features? And, I love it. I love that
Do you ever
aspect.
give much thought to the fact that there's also a line of Perfect Strangers merchandise in the Warner Brothers?
I don't get any part of it.
And but I mean, you're going to walk into somebody's house in 5 years and see them wearing a Balky apron while they're barbecuing.
Yeah, it's funny. As far as I'm concerned, it's like, when you shed skin. I mean, every 7 years, supposedly, I think it's even sooner for your face. I think your face regenerates every 2 years, and your whole entire body regenerates every 7 years. But it's like, my girlfriend actually broke up with me while I was preparing the role of Elliot, and it was a really tough time in my life. And I'd always loved her tennis shoes. I always thought they were so cute because they were so small. And when she left her tennis shoes. And for a while I was like, oh, they're so precious. They're relics. And then one day I was like, what are those tennis shoes doing here? I mean, it's over. So if I see a Balky apron on someone, it's like, that's nice. It's a Balky apron. It doesn't have anything to do with me. I don't feel like... I don't feel anything. What?
I should have had 5% of that. Damn them.
I don't feel anything.
Getting back to decomposing, can you talk a little bit about your death scene in this movie?
It's pretty horrific. Obviously what we shot was more extensive than what's on film. I mean, I was, riddled with bullets for a long time and then flopped out of the frame, and we did it a couple of times. But what's really horrible is that you have to kind of think about it. Ugh. And it's, you have to think like, Tony said, I want to see you get shot, and then I want to see you dead before you even hit the ground. I want to see you like dead on your feet. Ugh, it's gross. And then your blood is spurting out of you, and the director and the whole crew were behind plexiglass riot shields so that they wouldn't get splattered. And it's, it's kind of disturbing. Plus, when you're shooting it, there were like 5 other people that had to be murdered the same day as me, and you're waiting in your dressing room with all these squibs in you, and you see them go by dripping with blood, and they go, okay, you're up. And it's like being in A Tale of Two Cities and waiting your turn to be guillotined.
Is this your first death scene? Or shot up?
Well, I did a movie called Second Sight, which died a pretty horrible death, but this is my first intentional death scene.
If you're not... Oh, go on.
What?
Go on. I thought you were going to say something else. Sorry.
No.
If you're on about the experience on Perfect Strangers, how about Sarah?
Sarah was pretty hideous, but it was mercifully short-lived. Sarah, that should be in the TV Hall of Fame somewhere. They had Gina Davis and me and Alfre Woodard and Bill Maher, who's a very clever stand-up comic, and not a laugh in it. And it was like, how could you have the brilliance to take those people and make them uninteresting? That's really an effort. I haven't seen that thing in years, but that's work. And I remember what they did. We aired 13 of them, and we had this woman producer who was... there's a line in Julius Caesar, the sheeted dead did squeak and gibber in the Roman streets, and we used to call her the sheeted dead because she was so humorless. She was a horrible woman, and we called her the sheeted dead, and she got this idea that the problem with the show was that Gina was too beautiful. And so after 6 episodes, they made an announcement on TV and said, tune in next week for the all-new Sarah. And what the all-new Sarah was that they took Gina and gave her like yucky orange lipstick and made her hair droopy. And I remember Gina literally sitting in the makeup chair like... like, it was just stupid. It was like, let's make this beautiful woman plain, and let's make Bronson really not funny. And it was just pathetic. But anyway, I think she survived.
Do experiences like that make you want to direct so that you don't have to see beautiful people or funny or talented people have to do stuff that's completely not what they're best at?
Oh, it doesn't make me want to direct. It just makes me want to get successful so that... No, I want to act. I only want to act. But, once you... When you're misused as an actor, I don't mean abused, but it was just misused. Just they use you for the wrong thing. The only real revenge for that is to get to a place where you can say, no, I'm sorry, but this is how I look best. So just back off with the orange lipstick. You're not putting it on me, and get let's move on here. And when you get to that place, then you're just all right. It's not. And the longer the career, the bigger monster you can turn into. I mean, there's some movie stars that hear about that just have to direct the whole movie because they've done so many movies, and in the first 10 they didn't feel that they weren't used correctly, so they go a little overboard. But no, you just want to get to the place where you can say, actually, I'm not going to wear that orange lipstick, so let's just put it away now.
By the way,
Although I do use it in my personal life, and it's very, very nice.
I've noticed it.
when is The Trouble with Larry going to be?
That starts August 25th. CBS, 8 p.m. Be there.
Is that a regular time slot, whatever day of the week that is?
Yeah,
What day of the week would that be?
Wednesday.
Thank you.
They're going to give this.
I have a question for you. Do you think that the True Romance logo is obvious enough? I mean, does it say sex and violence to you? Huh? I mean, does it leave anything up to the amount? Okay.
We should have some blood dripping.
It's like, give me that. This is hilarious. It's like, okay, if you see our movie, you will see dry humping and bullets. And then that, in fact, is what you see. That is actually the title of my autobiography, Dry Humping and Bullets. And I hope you'll tune in.
We'll buy it. Yes.
So do you think it's
That's
too much
not the
violence in the
original
movie?
press kit as we can see.
Well, I'm sorry?
You think it's too much violence in the movie?
No, I don't, because I think there's a hell of a lot of violence in it, but I like what a statement it makes, which is, I think it's a very sweet statement, which is, that they're sort of magically saved from all that hideousness because they love each other, which is quite nice. I mean, that is what it says. It's lovely. It's just so touching. But no, I mean, I think it would be disgusting if they, got rewarded in the movie for loving all that. But in fact, all either of them does is try to avoid that. I mean, Christian, I think it's kind of nice. Christian kills one person in it, who's the most evil character in the whole movie, Gary Oldman, and then he puts up a gun to maybe the most defenseless person's head, which is mine, and he doesn't even intend to pull the trigger. He doesn't. And he's as wrecked after that scene as I am. He's like, neither of them intend to do that, so that's all right. I mean, if it wasn't the same story, I think, but that's like saying, taking the sex out of, it's like saying, a porn movie is just sex, and then a love story is sex, but with a story that you care about. I mean, if it didn't have that story, of course it would be gratuitous, but if this wasn't an interview and we were all sitting staring at each other, this would be gratuitous. If this was just my hotel room and you guys just all came to the door and you wouldn't tell me why you were here, this would be grotesque. But in fact, it has a purpose.
Well, you have that scene where it shows that you know how to have every kind of fun in a convertible.
Yeah. Now, see, that was the kind of thing that just comes from having looked in the camera a few times because, in fact, what, you mean when I have her head in my lap? But you see, we shot it, and then I said, Tony, how are you framing this? Where are you cutting? And he said, I've got you there. And I said, are you, cutting here? And he said, yeah. And I said, could we just show you something? Because I think this could be funny. And then we just showed him, and he thought it was it made him scream with laughter. But it just had to do with the way he had framed me, and kind of, after you've been, how those scenes work. It's so funny. Anytime you see anyone driving in a movie, and they think they're cool, they're being towed by a stupid-looking truck. It's so funny because you're styling, but meanwhile you're being pulled by a dumb truck. And after and not only that, but the director is sitting on the bed opposite you, watching you. It's so stupid. The whole thing is so dumb. So after we'd shot like 6 of them, and we really were getting giddy. It was like, what are we doing? We're supposed to be zooming through the mountains, and we're being towed at about 20 miles an hour through. You come up with dumb stuff like that because you feel like, well, let's do it, and if it doesn't work, we'll put it on the gag reel and see it at the party.
So that was improv.
Yeah.
I don't know when this was shot in relation to the Brandon Lee thing, but I'm just wondering that you're in that scene with Christian in the elevator and there's a gun to your head. Does something like that add
I don't know what. I never saw the Brandon Lee thing. You mean Dragon?
Nobody saw it. No.
Oh, no. Was that going through my head? No.
I mean, does it give you a different thought, different spin on weapons on a set? I know that was...
No, I didn't think about it at all. I didn't. Because no, I was just thinking about the reality of this for the character. I mean, there's so many distractions on a set. There's people moving around. I mean, I'm in here with Christian, right? And I'm like, but meanwhile, there's a guy out there drinking coffee and talking on his cellular. So you've really, 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 really got to be focused and just think about the reality of the character. Otherwise, you're dead. Because when your face is the size of this room and you're supposed to look scared, if you've got any other thought in your head, you'll see it. You'll just see a kind of distraction. As a matter of fact, I'm really a stickler for that. I'll stop in the middle. There's probably 1 million feet of film on me throughout my career saying, "Oh, excuse me, could you please move out of my eye line?" Because I don't know how anybody does it. There's always somebody with a Diet Coke, like right when you're supposed to be doing something right behind the camera. So I always get to move away, and then they put black cloth. I was doing a Pepsi commercial once, and I was, supposed to be drinking it as Matt Dillon or something. And no, I was playing Matt Dillon in this Pepsi commercial. And I said, guys, could I have no movement? And finally the director said, all right, I'll put black velvet over everything, but can I leave the camera on you? Or would you like me to? Is that distracting? What? I don't know. I'm sure it belonged to somebody. The budget on the movie was not sort of astronomical, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if it was Tony's sisters or something, because they...
Are you... How do you define Quentin's, upsurge? I mean, he's so hot now, whatever. He's got people waiting in line.
Yeah, how do I explain it, or how do I define it?
Either. Both.
Well, it's different. 2 different questions. I can't explain the popularity of anything. I mean, who can? I mean, if you could explain popularity, then you could explain why Last Action Hero wasn't a hit. What sense does that make? It supposedly had right? So I don't think any of us can explain popularity. But that's the second part of that. But I would say the thing that I like about his work is that he doesn't forget about the sort of... I mean, I think his dialogue and his action is similar to what really goes on in the brain, which is kind of like this. I mean, some people write like St. Joan. It's like, that's not really real. But writing that's like, okay, I am this. I talk like this. Remember True Grit? Remember that movie? And that one character was like, she wouldn't use any contractions because she was innocent. It's like, wait, do innocent people Innocent people don't use contractions. Interesting. I mean, remember that? She was like, I do not know why you are touching my breast. It was like, thank you so much. But I think Quentin writes in a way that's really like all over the place, and he doesn't, he just flows. I think there's great flow to it and great, just almost free-floating associations so that there isn't a sense of being boxed into something. Therefore, you don't know what's coming next, and therefore that's exciting. Huh? Yeah, it's just not like steel rod up the ass writing, that's like, boom, here's the character, and then here's, it's all crisscross. A tough character can say something sensitive. A bully can say something, funny. Like I had a character who was terrified, but I actually found some moments, as you would in life, when you're really scared to make a joke. There's all that nice stuff.
What about the violence?
He's obviously finds that it expresses what he wants to express. I mean, it's not for me to judge. The people, I don't know what to say about that. That's how he, you meet the guy and he's just the sweetest puppy dog that could be. I mean, he doesn't look like he ever has touched a gun in his life, and he probably hasn't. But, but Stephen Crane wrote The Red Badge of Courage, having never seen a battlefield in his lifetime. I don't know. It says something for him.
What do you think
about the mixing of the humor and the violence? I mean, the laughs that precede the shooting in the trailer and then the big shootout at the end. Do you think that makes violence maybe more palatable for an audience, or maybe even more unsettling?
No, I think it makes it more unsettling, and I also think it's truer to life. You know, I remember once, I used to live in New Haven, which is a pretty violent town, New Haven, Connecticut, and I remember, I was on my way to, huh?
Really?
Do you don't know New Haven, Connecticut?
I know very well.
It's a pretty raucous town, and I was walking home, and there was this woman, and all I saw were her legs sticking out of this trailer, and she was saying, "Don't kill me! Don't kill me! He's gonna kill me! Ah!" And I ran home as fast as I could, and you knew he had a gun. And just as I was leaving, I heard her say, "You son of a bitch!" I mean, he got off her for a second, and she said, "You son of a bitch," and he got on top of her again, and she started screaming again. It was so bizarre. She actually enticed him back on top of her. You saw these legs sticking out, and a guy and she was screaming, "Please don't kill me!" And then as soon as he got off, she said something like, annoying or glib to him, and he got back on and started to strangle her again. And it's real, People don't just come in, and it's not the 30s anymore where they say, "I'm gonna kill you," and then they kill you. It's got to be, I don't know, fortunately I've never been mugged, but I have a feeling that they probably have their own sense of humor. Like sex. I mean, people don't really go like, "Oh, I'm going to have you now." I mean, sometimes you make weird noises and then you stop and laugh and then you get back into it, right? I do. I mean, it's like, or you're kissing and you trip on something. I remember when we shot the big sex scene in Risky Business. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I watched. And there was this stunning moment. They got Rebecca De Mornay pretty crocked on white wine because it was her first sex scene on film. And the director wanted her to stand up and inch her underwear down with her thumbs and then step out of it. Well, she had these heels on, so she inched it down, and I was backstage with this other actor, and we were looking through, and we were like, "Oh, God." And then she tripped on it, she tripped on it, and we just died.
You should see her Showtime movie.
What?
You should see the Showtime movie she's got coming up.
Really?
You see a lot of her in
Do you? Hey, if you've got it, flaunt it. But I mean, she literally inched it down, and it was so sexy, and then her heel got caught on it, and she was down. And that's what it's like. So I guess the answer to the question is it's probably it's just closer to life and therefore more interesting and more unsettling, I think. It's so unlinear. It's like, I'm going to shoot you, but first I'm going to joke with you, and then I'm going to kill you, and it's horrible. I have a feeling from the Grim Reaper back there.
Okay, so that was Bronson Pinchot. Anything you want to say about that, Greg?
I mean, the thing with Bronson is he's always been a talented actor, but you could really feel the frustration that people will always consider him as Balki, because I'm sure you guys have seen True Romance. He's very good in True Romance, and he's just a very multifaceted actor. And I wish his career, I mean, he's steadily worked since then, but I would have loved to have seen him in much more higher profile stuff.
I think, sometimes really high profile roles can be both a blessing and a curse. And I think Balki was really good for him while he was doing it, and I think he's been saddled with it ever since.
Well, that being said, good luck to him with the chilling Adventures of Sabrina. He was just announced for that. It is coming out later this year. So That's work.
Wish only good things for him.
Wish only good things for him. Who are we wishing good things for right now? Maybe not here on this plane, but
well, that was weird.
That was I'm not very normal, sir. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, sadly, we have another late interview, someone who is no longer with us.
Yes.
And this is director Tony Scott, who died June 21st, 2010 of a suicide. He jumped off a bridge in San Pedro at age 68. Later on, his brother Ridley Scott revealed that he had been fighting cancer. So very sad, a really talented guy. His last movie was Unstoppable with Denzel Washington and Chris Pine. Of course, he's best known for Top Gun. That was his huge claim to fame.
It's not a big spoiler, but it's great to hear him talk about one of his more underrated films, the 1990 release Revenge, which starred Kevin Costner and Madeline Stowe. I thought that was one of his more ambitious films. So he talks about that during the interview. Of course, I also loved the film before True Romance, which is also, I believe, underrated, The Last Boy Scout, which starred
Bruce Willis.
Bruce Willis, Halle Berry was in it for a short period, I believe.
You know, he's made a lot of good movies. You know, Days of Thunder. Right after True Romance, he made Crimson Tide, which was a great film. Enemy of the State, Spy Game, Man on Fire, The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. I mean, these were all quality films.
All quality films, I thought. And it was great to see him throughout his films he always wanted to create something new, even though the material itself, and you'll listen to this in the interview, whether it's a remake or a rehash of a genre, he was trying to inject new life into the narratives, which I always appreciated about his films.
Yeah, you know, his brother, Ridley Scott, always seems to get a lot of attention. You know, he's considered to be one of the greats, but I think Tony was up there too. I mean, there's pretty consistently solid body of work.
Yeah.
So let's see. In the interview that we're about to listen to, I've got some notes down. He talks about how he and Ridley both had Pancho Villa projects in development.
And that was a big brouhaha back in the day, because I remember reading all these magazines that aren't around anymore. I don't know if Movie Line's still around, or Premiere, probably. Anyways, there's a whole thing about them battling and for the rights to Pancho Villa. One of them was going to do one story, one of them was going to do the other. So you're going to see the truth come out in this interview.
At the time, they thought that they were both going to come out simultaneously and they were going to battle each other. But in fact, neither movie ever got made.
Right.
Okay, there's one more thing that we do need to talk about. And this is something that's going to be a recurring thing as we go forward with these other episodes. And that is the limitation of the fact that we were recording these interviews on cassette tape. It's not like today's technology where you're recording to file and you've got gigs of RAM on your card or whatever, and you can just go and go and go. Back then, on cassettes, you were limited by what the technology was, and there would be 50 minutes to a side. And you would just have to try to get 2 interviews on a side, but it didn't always work. Sometimes they stayed a little longer, and you weren't expecting that. And you would be participating in the interview and enjoying it, and then you'd hear a click, and you'd look down, and your tape recorder had stopped. And so you very quickly flip the tape over, and you fast forward a little bit to get past the leader, and then you hit record, and by the time you've done that, you've lost 15 to 20 seconds. And a lot of these tapes, unfortunately, have those gaps in them, and there's just nothing we can do about it. And I gave this a lot of thought as an engineer of this show to try to figure out what to do about this. The decision that I came to is just leave it all in with whatever it is we have of those bytes, and you're just going to hear a little beep, and they're going to be in the middle of a sentence, probably in the middle of a word, and you'll hear a beep, and then suddenly they'll be in the middle of another sentence. And it's disorienting, but you have to kind of shrug that off and go, okay, I missed a little of it. That sucks, but you know, it's better than not having any of it at all. So you're going to hear this a lot as the show goes on. There are quite a few interviews that have these missing little bits, and you'll hear a beep. And we apologize, but it's what we got.
Yeah, go with the beep and go with the story, folks. Without further ado, here is Tony Scott.
Something just thinking about that. We just saw Hard Target a week or so ago, and there's a sequence in there where the actress shoots this guy below the belt, and the censor or the ratings board wanted that cut out.
Right.
And here we have at the beginning, Christian is basically doing the same thing. Not just with that, but with anything. Did you have a ratings problem? Did they say anything to you about it?
It's funny, it's almost an identical problem. That at the end of the movie, Patricia Arquette actually she shot Chris Penn. You know, she was in terms of the story, it was justified that she should be the person that gets the last guy that's in their way and stopping their escape. And the ratings board, at that point in time, there was a lot of sensitivity in LA to killing cops or killing policemen. And so they said they didn't want the hero, one of the heroes of the movie, killing this supposedly innocent cop. Yeah. But unfortunately, I felt it was true to the story that she should be the person that gets the last guy.
Was that the only thing they had a problem with?
No, they had. I mean, that was the strongest for me, the most difficult problem to come to terms with. The real problems, and the other problems were in blood and gunshots and like in the end sequence, it got very watered down. I mean, there's a 2.5 minute difference between what I call the European version and the the domestic version.
How do you feel about that, having to sit with those?
Badly. There's nothing you can do. You got a choice of having an NC-17, having an X, or having an R. And one contractually, I had to, produce an R-rated movie.
Do you sense, though, that there's, that they have standards, or does it seem a little ambiguous and hard to?
No, they have standards, and the standards become tougher and tougher every year, and the standards are dictated to by public outcry. In terms of thinking how, that violence in movies is a big influence on kids in the street.
But don't you think that sometimes it's maybe how they feel in the morning when they get up, that
True.
they will allow that level of violence to go through the day because I got up feeling this way, but they won't allow it to go above this the next day?
No, I think there is an overreaction at the moment to the media in terms of what we put into movies, which gets released and the kids get to see.
So you're not concerned then about, or are you concerned about how far to go, or whether a film like this can have a negative effect?
No, I am concerned, but I made a choice to make a movie, from a script that I read, and everything was on the page, and I knew that I'd be up for this sort of criticism. The movie is going to be criticized, for its violence, but the violence is integral to the piece. It's not as though it's gratuitous violence. It's all adds up to story and character beats, and so I don't feel there's any point in time in the movie that the violence is there for the sake of violence. And I've always been attracted. I don't know why. I began my life as a painter. I've always been attracted to the dark side and the violent side of life and people. The beginning of my painting life I was influenced by, my big influence was Hieronymus Bosch and Bruegel, and then Francis Bacon. And Bacon's the real dark side of life.
Who would you say is a director that's most influenced you in your work?
God, there's not one person. Roman Polanski was my hero for many years. Peckinpah, Terrence.
I thought of him during the scene.
Yeah. Terrence Malick, I think, is one of my all-time heroes. He did Badlands. Yeah, so listen, I'd love to see this movie's almost a tribute to Badlands.
Do you think you're going to have some problem with the Sicilian question?
Yeah, no, and it's going to play real well in Sicily.
What about test audiences? Do they have any effect on Final Cut?
To be honest, no. The MPA really had, because it's funny because the reaction was the same on all the cuts that we actually showed. The cuts just got progressively more refined and better, But the audience sits there, say, okay, so this is a love story, and they're sitting like that. By the end of the movie, they're like that because it's like doing Speed for 2 hours. It's very compelling. It's a really audio-visual experience, I think. And that's why I think the music is important. Also, I believe in this day and age that you should use all the facilities that are available. And I think sound and level of sound is important in this movie because the general response is the movie is exhausting, and that's what it's intended to do.
There's a certain punctuation that you have with the music and for certain scenes.
Yeah.
Did you have that set up way in advance? Did you say, I'm going to choose a certain style of music to punctuate what I have in the script here?
To be honest, music, you always have these great, grand ideas on this is how we're going to design the music for the movie. And then when you come to editing, you go, oh, Christ, that was a stupid idea. And it's like, and I still function like a painter in terms of, director. Directors work is about making choices, and a painter's job is making choices, and you have a particular scene, and you want to enhance it with a particular piece of music, so everything sort of comes together in that way. So then you try all sorts of different pieces of music, but I think the music is very interesting for the movie and complements the movie very well. It's such a hodgepodge and such a mixture of classical. The opening piece is derivative and was inspired by Carl Orff, which is a piece of music I had in my bottom drawer for 20 years, even before Badlands. And then I used Lakme, the Dalib piece, which I also used in The Hunger. And it's funny, somebody just made an observation. I used it for a love scene in The Hunger between two women. Now I use it in the Chris Walken, Dennis Hopper killing scene in this, but it works equally well in both cases.
Why did you choose that particular?
I find it difficult to articulate why I chose it. I function by my gut and by my instincts the same way as I function as a painter, And it's like painting pictures. You put down Dennis Hopper and Christopher Walken and a shaft of light, and then you have this sense of humor at the scene. You think, what piece of music goes with this? Now I was reluctant to use it because I used it before, but I couldn't find anything better. And so I said, God, this piece is great. There's a flash of red, which is Talib.
There's a hell of a cast here. Quentin had used Chris Penn and Bill Sizemore, and he wanted Hopper for Reservoir Dogs. Did he have any sort of say that, I really see these guys here, or did they leave everything up to you?
No, he left it up to me. To be honest, the first script I read was the script that we shot, and so in terms of creative conversations, Quentin and I didn't have that many. He just told me where his ideas came from about the characters, where their souls were based, and then after that I stayed religiously to the script because I loved the script, and so did the actors. All the actors came in, and all they did was they didn't want to change anything. They just wanted to embellish what they already had. As with Walken and Hopper, the two guys started rehearsing the scene together, and the only difference that they gave, which wasn't on the page, was they gave it a real sense of humor and laughter, which is a great help in terms of increasing the dynamic arc of the piece, because one minute you want to laugh with them, and on the other hand you don't, because you know the outcome of the scene. Dennis is gonna.
What was the toughest scene to shoot? The hardest one.
I think the final shootout, because it was tough for me, only in that shootouts have been done to death, and it's always trying to do something fresh or different is so hard, because it's. Shootouts have been butchered and have been beautifully done, and I suppose Peckinpah was the only guy I'd say, that I stole from in the end shootout. But I haven't an original thought in my head my whole life, I think, but I steal from everybody. But as long as you can steal, make it that little bit better, it doesn't matter. But just the feathers and the cocaine in the air just gives you a smile, and then the Italian behind the sofa, so it's like First World War in the trenches. Just those little punctuations help make the scene a little refreshingly different. And that's what's hard. What is hard is doing scenes that you've seen done before 1,000 times and trying to give them something new.
You were on about the music earlier. You used Hans, and so has Ridley.
Yeah.
But there's also talk that both of you are doing a movie on the same theme. What's happening on that?
That is. The only connection is that both have Pancho in the title, but Ridley's is really Lethal Weapon at the turn of the century, and mine is a more serious shot at something like Lawrence of Arabia. And Pancho Villa appears in Ridley's movie for maybe 20 seconds, and Pancho Villa is the lead. Tom Mix and Pancho Villa they're the two leads in my movie, so they're the same period but totally different movies.
On a scale of Lawrence of Arabia?
Yep.
Really?
Yep. Big. So we've got the Mexican government or Mexican army involved.
With the day.
Eh?
Of the day.
Of the day, yeah.
With the advent of Laserdiscs for home entertainment and Laserdisc with supplemental information attached to them, have you been approached about doing any of your films?
Yes. All of them. Top Gun, Revenge, I think all of them, yeah.
Do you plan to do all of them, or are you being selected?
Transfer to Laserdisc, you mean?
With supplemental information from you.
Oh, I see. No, I'm sorry. No, I haven't, because I haven't done that in the past. They're just the films have been transferred to Laserdisc, but I haven't done. Adrian Lyne does all his movies. There's Adrian Lyne's cut. The only movie that I want to say is my cut. It would be Revenge, but unfortunately, I can't get the studio to release my cut of Revenge, which is 34 minutes shorter than the studio cut, which is rare. Normally, a director's cut is 34 minutes longer. Mine's shorter.
Do you find that your experience, having been a commercial director, has really helped you with economy in certain scenes that other directors would have gone on forever with?
I think, for instance, in Top Gun, the aerial sequences in Top Gun, I think my training in advertising and commercials really help give that energy and speed and danger in the air, because I understand what a 4-frame cut means, as opposed to, that when we saw the footage of Top Gun, all the jets in the air, went, oh, God, this is boring. because everything is silver jets against blue sky, and there's no sense of speed or movement. But we knew that going in, so because of working in advertising, you know how to create and build excitement and speed in editing, but you need to anticipate what images you need in order to make that build at a later stage.
In the film you did with Zenab, I even noticed that in the sensuality scenes,
Hunger.
they were quicker than I would have expected, but they were the styling was so intense. It was so hit you right in the head right away.
I think I think you're right. I think advertising is obviously a big influence in terms of my film style and painting as well. So I think The Hunger embodies both parts of my life. 10 years in commercials and 8 years as a painter. I think that was. I also think it's been brought to bear on True Romance as well.
As a painter, when you finish with the canvas, sometimes it's hard to let go of it, and you have to know when. Do you feel that as a director, it's hard to say, I could just do one more thing and put one more dab there?
True, but there's a difference when it costs you $100 to paint a painting. It cost you, in this case, it was relatively small budget, $16.5 million. But each time, time is money, and every time you pick up a camera, it costs. So you have to. So people shut you down. But you're right. As a painter, I never gave up in a painting. I would always go back and back and back and back.
Tony, you've worked with some big stars, but tell us that you give them an opportunity to express themselves, and you listen to them.
Yeah. No, I believe that when you have the quality of actor that I had in this movie, you should rely on their instincts. You cast them in the part because you feel they're right for this particular role, and then my belief is you should give them the room to move and contribute. What they feel is right for the character in the scene. But just watching, Chris and Dennis work together was, and how they together through the process of rehearsal and the shooting of the scene, how the scene slowly changed shape and how their characters changed, and they did a big change in tone of the scene. But it was, they're two of my heroes, and have been for many years, and so it was a pleasure to watch them work.
What about Chris and Patricia together? That really is. Did you know going in that they'd connect so well?
Nope. You always hope. Yeah, but this was another match made in heaven. Yeah. No, it was great because they were the same that watched, because they were the two characters. Patricia's this, or she became, after doing her homework in Florida, she became Alabama, and she remained in character for the duration of the shoot. Yeah. And Christian is Clarence. She went down there, but Alabama hung down, or Alabama. Patricia hung out with these girls down there, and she came back, and I didn't recognize her. I said, "Fuck, it's not Patricia Arquette, it's this." And she remained in character. She's the original Method School of Acting.
What did you do? Where did you send her to?
No, she went off on her own. She did her homework. See, often actors talk about, I'm going to go off and do my homework. I'm going to hang out with my role model for this particular role. But very rarely do they do it. But Patricia went down. Another person who does it is Robert Duvall. Robert does an enormous amount of homework and has a role model in life, I think, for each of his characters in his movies.
What happens when the leads aren't a match made in heaven? Have you run across that?
Yep.
And what do you do?
You sort of struggle through every day.
How did you manage to struggle through every day?
Well, not in this movie. No, this movie was great. On this movie, with difficulty. It's hard. You just gotta politicize, and I don't know. It's hard.
Can you overcome it? Can you conquer it?
Yes, we have in the past. I've been lucky so far. Yeah, and normally I manage to patch up the differences. Yeah, but it's difficult when you get those differences.
And a lot of wishing that the last day would arrive, I would think.
Yes.
I was so interested to hear you say that if you had your druthers, Alabama would have shot the policeman in the final scene. I was wondering, how do you keep a balance of making your lead character sympathetic, even though they've shot and killed people, they're trying to get rid of cocaine, she was a hooker. I mean, don't you think maybe her blowing away the cop might have pushed the audience sympathies over the edge?
Well, he was the guy that shot Christian. And in the end, he was the last. You know, I believe that she should have been a controller of her own destiny, you know, in terms of escaping from the hotel. So that's a broader stroke, and that's how I'd focus it. And so, you know, whether she pushed him out of the way or she shot him, she should have been instrumental in terms of opening that door for them to actually escape. And an incidental character did it, and therefore I don't think it's quite as fulfilling for the lead characters in the movie or the plot of the movie that somebody else, you know, happenstance, you know, was the way they managed to get out. Yeah, so I'd much rather that she'd been the one that was instrumental in being able to open that door.
Did you ever worry at any point, though, you might lose the audience sympathy for these two characters?
No, because I mean, when I'm shooting the movie, I did, because if Christian and Patricia hadn't worked and you hadn't liked them and you hadn't been reaching out to them, I think the movie would have been in the toilet. Yeah, but you know, when we started cutting the movie, you know, both of them have got such charm and sweetness, and you want things to work out for them. You want to run with them. You know, the movie would have been a very different movie if those kids hadn't been good.
Still, cuddly coke dealers are not exactly in vogue, you know.
No, true, but you know what? For me, the movie is about a quest. It's about a dream, and it's about these two kids. They have a means to an end. The means to an end is this big suitcase full of cocaine. It could be dollar bills, it could be diamonds, but it happens to be cocaine. But it's a means of them, if they can sell this, of pursuing a dream of a better life together, and then it becomes this quest for this better life, which is selling the cocaine.
It would have been a lot more palatable if it were diamonds or money.
Yeah, but it didn't seem to make sense, or the reality of the stories didn't seem to work with diamonds or with dollar bills. You know, you try and, if you flash back to the beginning of the movie, you make Gary Oldman a diamond dealer in Detroit. Doesn't quite work as well as a coke dealer. You see Gary with his dreadlocks and he's dealing diamonds.
Is Joel Silver going to produce any movies for you in the future? After this?
After this one, that's the question I was been asking. But you know, the honest truth is that everybody should take a look at the original script. And the original script, this character is exactly as scripted, and it was Quentin's acting coach. Has Quentin been in here?
No, he's next.
He's next, okay. Well, I have to ask Quentin. But this guy was on the page word for word and detail in terms of wardrobe, as was the character, the Saul Rubinek character in the movie. Yeah, but Saul was great because he's funny and he's just...
So it was Quentin going after Silver, not you, is that what you're saying?
Hey? No, he never met him, Silver, then. This was Quentin when he was back. This was 8 years ago. So Quentin didn't even know Joel Silver existed, I don't think, yeah.
So then Silver really is a stereotypical movie producer, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not kidding. Listen, if I was Joel, and I'm friends with Joel, you know, so if I was Joel, I'd be flattered, you know, because the character's intelligent, funny, and but
he got so pissed off at Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Did he?
You know,
I missed that.
Yeah, the Steve Martin character in Grand Canyon. He was writing letters, and he was all bent out of shape over that. I would think this one would really tweak him. You know?
You guys obviously interviewed Joel, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh God. No, Joel he's brilliant, and I'm not trying to be a nice guy. And I had a good experience with Joel. He's a tough producer, but he's very smart, very articulate, and one of the best producers in this business. You know, he makes a particular sort of movie, but he's good.
Can you talk a little bit about? I mean, it's nice to see that Elvis is still alive after all the concern we've had about him. But choosing Val Kilmer to.
Yeah, no, Val. My first experience with Val was on Top Gun. He played Iceman, and I thought he did a brilliant job in playing Jim Morrison in The Doors. You know, and. I shot Val so you could actually see. I shot Val as Elvis, but there's only one person who looks like Elvis, and that's Elvis, you know. And I shot him through a mirror, reflected another mirror to make it a little more obscure, a little more obtuse. But in the end, even that was too much, you know. And Val was brilliant he became Elvis, as he did with Jim Morrison. So for 3 months before he did this little role in True Romance, he was Elvis. You know, you get him on the phone. And he is Elvis. He walked, talked, smelled like Elvis, you know.
No truth to the rumor that.
And he said, "I want to play Elvis."
Now, what's it like directing?
Dead rock and he only plays dead rock and rollers.
Yeah, right.
Directing a Tarantino script, I would imagine everybody in the world wants to be in it. Where do you?
Yes.
How do you? This is pretty much a buyer's market in this for you, isn't
Yeah.
it?
No, and that's the first time it's happened. You know, the acting community got wind that there's this script out there, and they were knocking on knocking on my door saying, I want to play. You know, and I want to play in this movie. And the danger was at the beginning, you think, oh, God, you know, you're Chris Walken, Dennis Hopper, Val Kilmer, all these guys are going to take over those particular sections of the movie, you know. But in the end, we got such a range of great actors that the talent level just rose and everything equally balanced through the whole movie, you know. So I don't feel that one cameo in the movie, you know, actually took over that section or detracted. You know, the only time I've seen an audience, the only time the audience stopped, they said, "That's Bronson!" You know, when we're at the was it Magic Mountain, yeah. But because I think, but then Bronson very soon blended back into the mesh because he was great as the assistant to Joe.
Were all the bits and pieces of the movies in the script the way they're interwoven, or did you add?
No, all it was. I'm just trying to remember. I think it's as was. To be honest, it's a little bit. The script is different. It's a little more linear than the first draft that I read of Quentin's. Quentin's was Reservoir Dogs, you know, you were doing lots of flash forwards and flashbacks, yeah. But I shot the script so it enabled me to be able to cut it in that way. But in the end, in the editorial process, we made it a little more linear.
Trish Arquette, when she was in here, said she was sort of terrified doing her sex scene preparation for it, and then, you know, having to take the sheet off and be on camera naked.
Yeah.
Did you want to make it any hotter than it actually was?
No, because I believe there's a sweetness and an innocence in terms of the relationship, you know. And the only time that I asked Patricia and Christian to be naked was when the two of them were sitting on the edge of the bed. I don't really remember the scene, and you know, very well. But there's just one shot where they're sitting like two little 10-year-olds holding hands, you know, at the end of the sex, and it was almost like Christian had blown it because he's sort of hanging his head. But there's something very sweet about it and disarming, and that's what I felt was interesting. You know, there was a child. On one hand, there's a childish innocence to the scene. On the other hand, you see her licking his stomach, so it sort of pulled and pushed you in two different directions. But for me, the real focus of the scene was the last shot where the two of them were sitting like two 10-year-olds holding hands, and. But the intention was never to make it a hot and heavy sex scene as we did in Revenge.
Is there a temptation when you have a cast list like this to overuse the talent? I mean, when you see Hopper and walking on screen together, is it tempting for a director to say, we got to do this, we got to do more,
Right. Yes, it is. But my belief is that I've come unstuck on the path in trying to rewrite movies midstream, you know, or mid-movie, and I think it's a dangerous process, you know, because once you're actually shooting movies, it's like running a marathon, and when you're 12 miles in, you're not thinking very clearly, yeah. And so no matter what my gut instinct tells me, I've learned that you should respect what your pre-production period and your script period, and say stop, you know, don't fuck with something which was good before, because you're not seeing too clearly right now.
That must endear you to a lot of writers.
Yeah, exactly. No, they do it, yeah. But I think that happens so often in movies that people do. You know, they get into the movie and they say, let's change this, let's do this, let's do that. And I think it's a dangerous process, and I'm not a writer, you know, so maybe that's why I'm less comfortable with attacking the big picture, you know, midstream.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're back. Tony Scott, great filmmaker, great story. Loved his backstory as a painter. What did you love about the interview, Matt?
Well, I thought it was really interesting that, I mean, this is 1993, and there's all this talk. I mean, the conversation back then was about the influence of violence in movies, and we're still having those same conversations all these years later. I mean, you know, nothing has changed.
You know, when you watch a Tony Scott movie, by default, there's just going to be a lot of violence in it. I mean,
well, not just Tony Scott. When you watch a Quentin Tarantino movie,
oh right, yeah, double,
there's going to be a lot of violence.
Which is True Romance is the team up of QT and Tony Scott, so that's a lot of violence in True Romance. So this is just part one of the whole thing.
Yes, as we mentioned earlier, we have 8 interviews. They're kind of long. Each one of them is about 25 to 30 minutes, and we didn't want to have a 4-hour show, so we cut it in half. So this is the end of part 1. Next up, we're going to have part 2. So we hope you'll check that out. And that will have Michael Rappaport, Christopher Walken, Quentin Tarantino, and Christian Slater.
Oh, very good. The star of the show, Christian Slater. But before we go, we have to plug our little plugs, right?
We just want to mention our webpage, which is mattandgregpodcast.com, and also our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/mattandgreg. Mm-hmm. And we invite you to come and insult the hell out of us.
Yeah, you're right. Like Matt said, insult the heck out of us. Provide some insight.
I did say heck. That's exactly what I said.
Heck. Yeah, provide some insight, some comments, et cetera, on our Facebook page.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you like, what you don't like. You know, if you want us to stop talking and just get to the stuff, you know, it's all good. We want to hear it. We want to know. And, you know, if enough people say something, we may change it, or we may not.
But on that note, get ready for the next episode, which is True Romance Part 2. Until then, we'll see you folks next time. Matt, sign off. Close it out for us.
Bye.
Bye.
We now return you to your regularly scheduled lives.